Welcome to the Regen Brands Podcast, the place for brands, retailers, investors, and other food system stakeholders to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. I'm your host, AC. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's get into today's conversation. On this episode, we're digging deep, literally, into why measuring soil carbon is so essential but so difficult, and what it takes to make it faster, cheaper, and easier. We're joined by Chris Tolles, co-founder and CEO of Yardstick, a soil carbon measurement company that's helping unlock the data needed to scale regenerative agriculture by affordably and accurately delivering the ground truth data that proves the ROI of regenerative practices. Chris walks us through the graph that convinced him soil carbon was the climate solution to bet on, and why most current measurement methods are too expensive, too slow, or too inaccessible to meet the moment. You'll learn how Yardstick's field-based spectroscopy technology changes the game and why ground-level measurement will always matter more than watching from space. We also explore how Yardstick is working with carbon project developers, land funds, and food brands, why these partners want the data, how they're using it, and what outcomes it's helping them achieve. Plus, Chris tells us what it actually looks like to measure soil carbon on a 1,000-acre farm. He gets real about the limitations of consumer demand to spur a regenerative revolution. He unpacks the drivers behind the underfunding of nature-based climate solutions, and he shares his perspectives on what the voluntary carbon market might look like in 10 years. Woo! Tons of stuff to unpack. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands Podcast. Very excited to have my friend Chris from Yardstick joining us. So welcome, Chris.
Howdy.
Good to have you here, man. For those that listen to the podcast regularly, we have a very exciting non-brand episode, even though I feel like
a brand.
I was going to say, Yardstick, I feel like we got to get into the CPG game. I don't know if it's like a functional bar that's like a yard long or like what we could do with the name, but my brand architecture brain was tingling with possibilities.
Not on the shelf at Whole Foods. That we can say with clarity. Yes.
But Chris, the company that you're running and the service that you all are providing, I think many of us feel is very important to this whole regenerative agriculture thing working out long term, because soil carbon is pretty central, I think, to a lot of the theses around how this thing's going to be valuable and work and help from a climate mitigation and climate adaptation and carbon sequestration and all those standpoints. So excited to dive into all of that with you today. For those that aren't familiar with Yardstick, can you just give us a brief overview for who y'all are and what y'all do?
You bet. We are a soil carbon measurement company. So I'm the business guy, but we are commercializing a bunch of science that's been going on for a long time before Yardstick. My jam is science commercialization. This is that.
Yeah.
Particularly, we're replacing laboratory analysis with a fancy alternative called spectroscopy. And we're a service. So we get hired to measure soil carbon rather than selling a piece of hardware, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Our customers are unsurprisingly soil carbon project developers in the voluntary carbon marketplace, but also food brands, also land funds, also some other stuff. Fundamentally, though, the problem that we're solving is quantification of soil organic carbon stocks and stock changes over time on agricultural land, which has mostly been row crops and grazing land, but forests have soil. Ain't no forest without soil. So certainly what we're excited about from an impact perspective and a commercial perspective is all the soils of the world, of which there are many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. Thank you. It's good. It's a good overview. And this is an interesting topic, I would say, for our platform, because most of the brands that we talk to are really relying on some sort of identity preserved, segregated ingredient product specific claim, right? But there's this whole other world of regen ag where you could maybe say there's even more going on than in our typical kind of world, where there's much more of a focus on kind of outcome metrics as it relates to farm level data, right?
Yep.
And I'm really excited for you to kind of unpack that and be maybe our first true episode really laying all that out, because I think you do a really good job of articulating all of that. before we dive into more of the details on the company and just lots of other topics, like give us a little bit of your background, how you got here, why like soil carbon and the measurement of that was the next challenge that you wanted to pursue. Like what's your story and how did you get here?
Yeah. So the why I think is I want to look my kids in the eye. I want to
Mm,
do stuff that like matters long term. Uh, I'm highly confident that at some point, like my kids are going to ask me, like, "What the hell did you do? Right? Where were you?"
yeah.
And as always, like truest things in the world, I think are about holding paradox. Like they will be spot on with that implicit criticism. I doubt they will approach it that Socratically, right? It'll probably instead be like, why weren't you?
Yeah.
And yeah, I want to be able to tell them, like, I don't know, I did my best, right? I put some part of my life towards things with deeper value. There's a lot of different big problems in the world.
Yeah.
Um, climate change is at least top three, and they're all interrelated. So my gift I learned early in my career is science commercialization. I actually went to art school undergrad. I have a degree in
Mm,
furniture making, but was in the
wow.
early yeah yes. So backup plan in the apocalypse. Um,
Well, that's why
and
y'all's piece of hardware looks so good because of that degree in furniture making.
No, no, no. That's all my co-founder Kevin. That's him and his team, guy named Dalton. We've had brilliant people making the hardware look nice, but I will
Yeah.
take credit for the aforementioned brand. Um, I went to a school called RISD, Rhode Island School of Design,
Mm,
and that's definitely like where I learned to be a design problem solver.
mhm,
But I went to art school not because I wanted to like make websites for a living, or
mhm,
even I didn't study furniture because I wanted to make furniture for my job. Um, what I actually loved at RISD, ironically, was that the furniture program was less commercial than industrial design. And I
mm,
wanted these tools of like solving problems better, like using better problem solving toolkits
mhm,
for the problems that, as far as I can tell, like aren't being solved very well with like a lot of, conventional problem solving approaches. And was just really lucky, as always, to have an early career experience that made me realize there's a ton of amazing science in the world that does not have impact because some scientist publishes a paper
mhm.
and then they've done their job. And this is a much deeper conversation about sort of like the role of academia and the incentives of academic careers. Certainly, most of our technology like did start in a lab somewhere, so clearly some makes the transition.
Yeah.
But living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I live right now, got involved in a company spun out of MIT. I was like, holy shit, like there's really, really cool stuff happening within science programs around the world.
Mhm.
If I want to be an impactful person in the world, that would be a cool place to sort of find dry
Yeah.
powder, as it were.
Yeah.
And because that first experience was a bunch of product people
Mm,
with not a lot of business acumen, specifically, I very quickly realized like, oh, I want to be taken seriously as the business guy.
yeah.
And so I got an MBA. That's how people take you seriously in business. Apparently, it works. They take me seriously now. Um, but it was really that early career experience, this solar startup in China, that got me religion around science commercialization being the thing. I had a previous founding role at a company that was doing an ingestible sun protection product. So I have all
Wow.
kinds of weird, yeah.
Wow.
We can spend an hour and a half on that if you want. But Yardstick is really like the most recent, I think, in a career of a bunch of different like trying to solve problems that matter, doing
Mhm.
so with the tools of business, warts acknowledged. And in this case, it was summer 2020.
Mm.
Not a great time for like buying a postdoc a beer out of MIT. And so a Slack group was like, the way many of us were connecting.
Yeah.
So met my co-founder Kevin in the My Climate Journey Slack group.
Wow.
Didn't even meet him in person until after we had closed our first round of funding.
Wow.
He had already built a relationship with one particularly kind of wizard level scientist that had done a lot of the original academic research, and so that triumvirate of Christine, the scientist outside the company, like not an employee, but
Yeah.
effectively co-founding scientist. Kevin, my co-founder, hardware, SpaceX, Mickey wizard, and then me, business guy, is where Yardstick came from. Unbelievably, more than 5 years ago.
Yeah. It's crazy. Um, I can't even believe it's been 5 years since you and I've probably been connected that long or close to it as well.
Probably.
The there's kind of a three-part question that I feel like is a little bit loaded, but it's all interconnected, right?
I
Which
like loaded
is
questions. That's all right.
which is like describe the current state of soil carbon measurements, like where was the need, right? And why you personally were attracted to trying to solve that problem and thought like solving it was possible versus some of the other science you could have commercialized that had impact as well.
Yep. So I'll do the last one first, which means I'll probably forget the first question. So remind me. Like pretty literally, it was one graph that got me excited about soil carbon specifically, and we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
It's so the x-axis is gigaton removal potential.
Mm,
So many people at some point in the last 5 years got excited about carbon removal. That's
yeah.
good. It's important.
Yeah.
And that was me for a portion of 2020. Inarguable science that, like, in some ways it's too late. We not need to just abate emissions, but we also got to suck it back out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So thankfully scientists have been toiling, largely in obscurity, at least obscurity relative to my awareness, for a long time to stack rank each of these different technologies.
Mm,
And I have no interest ultimately in the, like, this carbon removal versus that carbon removal debate. Nonetheless, like, yeah, you got to, like, evaluate options. And so this plot has the x-axis is gigaton removal potential, the y-axis is cost.
mm,
And we want things, yes, class, in the bottom right. We want
yeah.
a lot of tons and we want them cheap. That's
Yeah.
the point, right? Um, these technologies all have pros and cons. Again, this is one plot. Never make like a major life decision on one graph the way I have. But the box in the bottom right hand corner is called soil carbon.
Yeah.
And so I vividly remember I was actually in this room on this monitor. I was like, I want that box. Can I have that box? How do we get that box? And so I started asking people, like, hey, how do we get that box? Like, am I reading this right? That's the
Mm,
good box, right? And they're like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, that's the good box. And so you start just asking the five whys, and measurement is not the only barrier, far from it, but like measurement is one barrier. So, as is the case, right place, right time, kismet, all the things. Kevin had already built a relationship with this scientist, Christine.
Yep.
I had seen this plot. What's one of the underlying barriers? Measurement. Maybe we should do it. Um, that said, soil carbon measurement is not one thing. So
Yeah.
I try and be precise in my language, as I did, to say we do soil organic carbon stock quantification.
Mhm.
Soil carbon is a whole bunch of different things. People use this language in very sloppy ways.
Yeah.
There are many other words being used in complicated, confusing ways, like your hat. So that's okay. Like, we can work through that. But I think what I am most excited about here is that we are absolutely not solving all of the problems in soil carbon measurement.
Yeah.
There are many that we don't even touch intentionally. So we gladly partner with others. Existing solutions are great, but particularly the question of proximal quantification. That means your boots on the ground, touching soil. Soil is underground.
Yeah.
Satellites cannot see underground. That's an oversimplification. Biogeochemical modeling companies that are shouting at your podcast app right now. But like, nonetheless, like, I am most excited about the ground truth data dimension of this,
Mhm.
and seeing this particular technology with this particular people of Christine and Kevin, looking at that plot, it was real easy for me to get excited about forming the company. At the time as well, fall 2020, there was a lot of enthusiasm for some of the early entrants of soil carbon project developers in the voluntary carbon marketplace.
Yeah.
And, like, we're an enabling technology, which
Mhm.
means if if the thing we enable isn't, cresting, good luck having real commercial opportunity. So it was also just great timing in that many of the companies that we would unlock, unblock, enable were themselves growing. Indigo was growing, was huge, was visible. And, you put all those things together and, here we are. But it was really that first principles, and still is that first principles analysis of, like, this is a thing that we have to do. I don't only care about carbon removal anymore the way I did then, but this is a thing that, like, we must do to not continue to experience catastrophic harm. And if I can unblock one of the 17 things that are getting in the way of that, like, that's again, look at kids in the eye kind of thing.
Yeah. Can you just like super layman basic for someone that doesn't live it every day
Oh,
like you
how's
and
it
I?
work now? Yes. Right.
Well, for even before that, like you all are really focused on soil organic carbon stocks. What are
Mhm.
like other things that people are measuring in soil that maybe are important, but like you are not focused on that, just so people understand the
Yes.
full kind of menu, maybe.
Yes, totally. So the most important distinction is emissions versus soil carbon.
Hmm.
So back to my example of the voluntary carbon market. Um, Most people assume, and I'm going to call it VCM from here on out.
Yeah.
Most people assume that the VCM, whatever your opinions of it, are crediting exclusively on the basis of sequestration of atmospheric CO2 from soils. That's
Hmm.
wrong. That might be a strategy, but like between reducing a gallon of diesel consumption and doing all this like crazy shit to get soils supercharged to suck down atmospheric CO2, I would rather the former. Like just stop burning diesel, right? Burn less, like that's good, right? Apply less fertilizer. There's
Yeah.
already overwhelming evidence that we over apply fertilizer. Start there.
Hmm.
And rightly so. Leading methodologies. Methodology means the big crazy PDF that defines who gets a credit or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
A leading methodology will give you credit for burning less diesel, will give you credit for reducing synthetic fertilizer application, and will give you credit for restoring or preserving soil organic carbon stocks compared to a baseline, a dynamic baseline, et cetera. So we do not quantify total agricultural emissions. The best language there is probably like an LCA, a life cycle analysis.
Hmm.
Many of the brands that are on your podcast, they want to hold their bottle up and, like the Allbirds shoe, 6.2
Yeah.
kilograms per blah, blah, blah. I don't do that.
Right.
What I do is an input to that, if it's done with high rigor. What we quantify instead is that one piece of the total agricultural emissions puzzle, which is stocks and stock changes. That's the most important distinction to make. And therefore, if our customer has a total emissions quantification, an LCA claim that they want to make, great. Call Qantas, call these other folks, and we will be a piece of that puzzle. But that's not what we focus on.
And the people that are sending soil to a lab now to get like their NPK levels checked or their biological activity checked, that is also not something you do and not really a focus of what you're offering, correct?
Yes, we do it in that if our customers want it, we will get it done.
Yeah.
And yes, our technology can replace laboratory analysis for some of those soil properties, but that has not been our R&D focus to date, nor has that been the source of our real revenue.
Yeah.
When our customers want those values as well, we just get it done the regular way. But
Hmm.
some of those soil properties are very, very well served by existing laboratory or wet chemistry processes. If you want pH analyzed, that could be like 250 at a lab.
Yeah.
Now you have to collect a physical soil, right? And that's often actually like the more expensive piece of the puzzle. That's why I do not believe in like, robotic efficiency gains within a laboratory environment as an acceptable solution for many of these things. But correct, we do not largely focus on we do not have a innovative way of providing nutrient data, and not many land managers that are measuring soil nutrition are also measuring soil carbon for any other reason.
Hmm.
So that's our kind of unlock is like, we believe there's a reason to measure this.
Yeah.
Our customers are not farmers, and we can talk more about that. But that means that even folks that are measuring a ton of things about their soil, 100% likelihood that they are not measuring the thing that we're focused on well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the core distinction that I have in my filing cabinet in my brain is like, this is not something that's easy just to tick on the box to get back when you send off that regular soil sample. Like that's the
Correct.
important distinction here is like this.
Yep, very correct.
Yeah.
And for two reasons. Number one, the way that you sample for it physically in the field is materially different. And number two, even if you do sample for it the right way in field, the actual sticker price at the lab is very high compared to the other things.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'm spending $20, add another $1.50 and call it a day with organic carbon. Neither the piece of soil that you're sending to the lab for NPK is sufficient, nor is it that 150 add-on in the end.
So we basically have like a science and a cost, which ultimately equals like an accessibility problem here, to put it
Mhm.
shortly, right?
Yep.
Yeah. We're gonna hit probably all the acronyms today. So you've already used VCM, which stands for voluntary carbon
Yep.
market.
Stop
We
me when
have
I don't define them up front.
we
I went to business school. This is the main way I get people to think I know what I'm talking about. Just slinging acronyms.
we've never had a glossary in the show notes, but this might be the
Oh
first
yeah,
episode that we
get
need a
ready,
glossary.
get ready.
the I think another thing that's important, maybe once again, for the people that don't live this every day, when we think about this measurement process, another acronym that's used is MRV. I think it's what
Mhm.
the longer one is MRRV or MMRV, which
Oh yeah.
you can define for us. But I'd love for you to maybe like talk about the current state of that and kind of the two things that are sometimes presented as adversary and also sometimes presented as complementary in terms of the satellite measurement and the actual like in soil measurement that you are focused on.
Yep. Yeah, you bet. So I don't spend any of my time trying to understand the different MRV or two M's, two R's acronyms. And I'm the CEO of Yardstick, so I don't know. I discourage your dear listeners from trying to get them straight anyway. If you ask ChatGPT, you will find like dissertation level
Yeah.
definitions because somebody's got to do that. But I don't really care. In aggregate, though, like measurement, M means measurement, which means measuring things. If there is a second M, it's usually monitoring. What's the difference? I don't know. Go read the paper. Reporting is the R, and then V is verification. The things that really matter at the end of the day is usually that, again, let's talk about VCM to start with, at least. In the voluntary carbon market, if Brother Anthony is a project developer trying to sell credits,
Yep.
you hire me to provide measurement data to your project.
Mm-hmm.
You then turn around and you hand that data to Vera. Vera is the registry that
Yep.
publishes the methodology. Again, big PDF that says, attention, Anthony, if you do these things, I will grant you a credit.
Yeah.
If then Vera will turn around and hand that data to a verifier, which is a separate organization that they basically licensed to check
Hmm.
their work. And the point is that at the end of the day, by the time Vera comes back to you and says, congratulations, Anthony, I grant you 1 ton that you may sell, you have this combination of primary measurement data collected by one or usually many service providers like Yardstick.
Yep.
You have the project developer, you, issuing the credits.
Yep.
You have the methodology and the registry, typically the same entity that are defining the rules of the credit issuance. And then you have the verifier that's a fourth organization that is usually checked a statistically significant portion of the overall work. And the idea is that that chain of data is more likely to be of higher quality. So in MRV, from a like doing the work perspective, the main thing to usually pay attention to is you, the project developer, have the whole burden. I am a measurement service provider, and the verifier is checking your work.
Mm-hmm.
To your point about satellites and whatnot, correct, they are often positioned as adversarial. And in like one way we are trying to solve parts of the same measurement challenge.
Yeah.
I would say in reality, 20% of our scope is overlapping and 80% is not overlapping.
Hmm.
So many of the best soil carbon biogeochemical modeling companies of the world are my customers and my friends. My technology, my data enables their offerings.
Yeah.
That we compete for headspace. And, in a scarcity market, which one finds oneself in with some frequency, we compete for investment dollars and blah, blah, blah. But in aggregate, their technology is worthless without training data. Very few parts of the world offer any training data. So how the hell are you going to teach a model to estimate soil carbon in Ghana in cocoa unless you go collect truth data? That's me. And if we can't model the impact of management practices on soil carbon, golly day, that means literally for all time, you need one of these crazy yardstick probes going out there forever. That's not very inspiring. It may be necessary, right? Right now, our ability, if you grow corn right now, you'll get paid on the actual amount of corn that leaves the farm gate, right?
Right.
No one models your corn and then hands you money. No one models your beef, right? So, of course, guy running the proximal measurement company believes that our technology is important, as far in the future as I can possibly see. But you are correct that they are not alternatives. They have the advantage of looking at massive scale at low cost because it's, quote unquote, only a piece of software. Their cost basis is much lower.
Right.
Some money to AWS. Whereas if I do want to directly quantify stocks, in Cocoa, in Ghana, I got to go to Ghana. And that's like a
Hmm.
giant pain in the ass compared to running a piece of software. Fundamentally, though, like I think we spend way too much time talking about the 20% that we may disagree on. And in practice, behind the scenes, when we're actually signing contracts, what's encouraging to me is that 80% of it is enabling of each other, grow the tent, different pieces of the same total measurement obligation pie. And this also comes back to methodological guidance. Like most methodologies in practice require both.
Mm.
Theoretically, a modeling company could choose to offer direct measurement services. Theoretically, Yardstick could decide, I'm going to grab Regrow's lunch, or I'm going to grab Perennial's lunch.
Yeah.
But these are completely different technologies. So I would discourage anyone from trying to do both of them because any one of them is hard enough.
So then when you think about the stuff that you are focused on with the actual testing in soil, my basic brain that you can correct or build on, right, is like, okay, you have the actual like travel cost to get to the plot. You have the
Hmm.
piece of hardware that's actually doing the testing. And then you
Yep.
have the cost associated with like actually running the lab testing that's
Yep.
additional. And then like preparing the data. So you have like four kind of leverage points, and maybe I'm missing some. So feel free to add. Like, how do you actually bring down the cost of those four things over a period of time that like make this
Yes.
more, you know, accessible?
Yep. So two ways to oversimplify, as all things are. The first is that our equipment can move faster. Now, people who work at Yardstick on our field team often disagree on this because they are the best damn conventional soil samplers in the world.
Yeah.
So the problem is, in order to train our technology, we have had to get amazing at conventional sampling as well. We
Hmm.
teach our probe to quantify organic carbon by teaching it on training data that we collect in the
Right.
exact same spot, conventional.
Interesting. Hmm.
And so many of the efficiency gains that our company has achieved in conventional sampling actually makes our cost competitiveness against ourselves like pretty limited. But that is pretty uniquely, in my experience, the domain of Yardstick is we are incredible at conventional sampling and incredible at spectroscopy. But that's cost advantage number one. If
Hmm.
you took a typical soil sampler out to the field and compared the amount of time that they spend in field conventionally versus spectral, we would have the advantage.
Hmm.
And this makes a lot more sense when you look at a video of our instrument in action, which I can send you and we can put in the show notes.
Yeah.
Uh, the second, which is more important, is the elimination of laboratory analysis. So while we concede that to directly quantify OC stocks, yes, you do need to be in the field, uh, our technology trains a spectral instrument. And so, again, you'll see in the video, when you collect data with our instrument, you're not taking anything out of the ground. You are effectively taking a movie of the soil profile
Hmm.
for 45 seconds or so, and then you're moving on to the next sample site. This is also why I mentioned previously, while I, of course, always want labs to be more efficient as they can be, I think fundamentally, unless we're eliminating the physical soil sampling itself, we're unlikely to see the magnitude of cost reduction that we need to really scale these technologies.
Yeah.
So they're sort of in reverse order of importance, but we go faster in field. Therefore, the cost of a person's labor is amortized around across a larger number of sample sites. Therefore, each one is cheaper, and we eliminate the lab analysis portion of the puzzle after we've trained our instrument.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And we're getting into the technology parts that feel a little bit over my head, but I'm following.
Hey, man, I went to art school. If I got here, you can get here.
Can you, Chris, just walk us through maybe like process and outcomes at a high level for non VCM partners or projects,
Yes.
right? So like you did a really good job articulating that, but when you work with an asset owner or you work with a food brand, how are they taking the data or the service you're providing and integrating it into some business outcome on their side?
Yep. So let's talk about land funds first. One is to be clear, like they want optionality on the VCM.
Yeah,
Most of them, the fundamental economic case of their land fund is appreciation of the capital asset of the
yeah,
land.
right.
So, for example, Clear Frontier is a customer, SLM is a customer. These are folks that, to oversimplify, they're house flippers for soil.
Yep.
They're buying farmland that they can make better by changing management. And the primary economic upside of that is either the asset itself is more valuable and someday they sell it, or the operations are more profitable and they enjoy the delta.
Yep.
But as the VCM grows, like if they can be doing measurement data in such a way that they future-proof their options to participate, that's good. There are many data that you have to collect to be ready for enrollment in a VCM soil carbon program. And if you are not aware of those ahead of time and doing them, if 5 years from now you're like, wow, we've really crushed it, VCM is looking great, let's do the math and see what other economics there are here, you're just not going to have that option.
Yeah.
That said, the reason they hire us is primarily to understand the impact of their management practices on the land that they've acquired or are managing differently.
Yeah.
So that either means they, like my metaphor is always we're the photographer to the house flippers, right? They're like, look how bad this apartment was. I'm like, now it's good, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, look how much stronger soil health is on this landscape. Therefore, you paid X dollars an acre, you could presumably get Y dollars per acre. Or they want to understand at a more granular level the relationship between management practices and on-farm economics. Um, and this actually gets into stuff that I'm a lot more excited about long-term for Yardstick, which is like soil carbon is the single best indicator of soil health. Soil health is the foundation of like all good money in farming. If we destroy soils beyond their ability to recover, like who cares about the VCM? You're not growing a lot of corn or a lot of soy or a lot of rutabagas or whatever. And so the reason why we're so proud to work so closely with the Soil Health Institute, which is the organization that Christine, the scientist I mentioned, works for, is because they're basically like blah, blah, blah VCM. Carbon's the co-benefit. This is just like more profitable farming.
Yeah.
And they do that with science rigor that is beyond any other quality of analysis I've seen anywhere in the world. So many people, as you know better than I, just talk constantly about, look at this side by side, and like their soil is bad, and I make so much more money. And like, whatever, like, I don't know, I probably do that too. But what SHI does is like, so we visited 100 farms across 17 states, and we'll publish the data with peer review. And again, we can include some amazing links in the show notes, but like 80 to 90% of farms that have deployed what they call soil health practices have higher profits.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell you or your audience, like half of farms in America lose money every year. Like we have a really sick, messed up farming economics foundation. There's a bunch of reasons for that. This is not the only fix. But one really exciting opportunity I see that is really clearly expressed in the land fund segment of our customer base is what if we can make farming more economically compelling?
Right.
Higher profits, greater gross margin per acre. Because we have an agricultural system that is so over-rotated on yield, like I'm not a farmer, I never give farmers advice. Nonetheless, like you don't feed your family on yield, right? Like most of the corn you're growing probably isn't for humans anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
What you feed your family with is gross margin per acre. So how can we take the focus off this thing, which serves agricultural input, mega ag, input salespeople benefit, and instead focus it on the bottom line of, revenues may go up, they may go down, but if costs go down and gross margin goes up, that's what you're feeding your family with. I would always rather value a business on a gross margin multiple or an EBITDA multiple than on a revenue multiple. And SHI's work is amazing for showing discounting VCM revenue opportunity entirely. You change your management practices, you restore soil health, you make more money. Raise your hand if you want that. And there's a lot more barriers, but like a lot of people raise their hand for that. So that's land funds.
Yep.
And then on the food and also commodity, supply chain side, it's mostly about supply chain resiliency, unsurprisingly. I'm so proud that we have General Mills and Organic Valley as customers. Couldn't be prouder. And for every dollar that General Mills puts into its net zero climate goals, it probably puts $1,000 into ensuring that it's going to have oats so that it can sell Cheerios, right? So when I think about leverage, I want to show a supply chain risk analyst that healthier supply chains save them money. All these companies pay business interruption insurance, right? All of these companies, suppliers, bear crop insurance risk. again, we can have a whole separate conversation about like crop insurance in America, but fundamentally, these are supply chains that are risky and increasingly risky.
Mm,
There's a great plot of basically like supply chain price volatility over the last, whatever it was, 30, 40 years. And it's like up and to the right, like
yeah,
bad.
right.
Volatility is up. It's not great science to ever attribute a single experience to any cause. That's not a controlled study. And in aggregate, when you look at some of the most important supply chains of our food economy, you're like, uh-oh, we are vulnerable. And
Right.
the root of that is changing climate and soil health, declining soil health. So while optionality is always welcome for food and ag brands, right? Depending upon how SBTI goes, what about all these acronyms again, right? Like greenhouse gas protocol, GHGP. My favorite is a FOLU, agricultural, forest, and other land use. I don't know. There is like potentially a real strong economic incentive to have reduced your agricultural emissions in the future. This
Yeah.
is like a real possible thing. In the EU, they have a law called CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that basically says like, hey, Organic Valley, if you want to sell your yogurt in France, we're going to assess carbon intensity at the border, and like you're going to get dinged based on carbon intensity. To be clear, that's not on food products yet. It's starting with, I think, cement and steel and electricity, but like the implications are obvious. So while there are some companies who I think have the foresight and the disconnection from the quarterly churn of public markets to make a long term bet that the economics of emissions reductions will pay out in the long run, more of the food brands that are getting curious, excited, signing contracts in soil carbon measurement are doing so because of this relationship between the measurement data we can provide and their overall goal of reducing supply chain risk, therefore reducing their risk and their cost to capital, therefore improving their economics.
Yeah. Okay. That was very well said. And it was also a lot. So let's just summarize real
Whew,
quickly for the
let's take a
audience.
deep breath.
So
Stretch break.
there's like three main kind of project pathways, partnership pathways, like pathways of value here, right? So you have the voluntary carbon removal marketplace, and you are an enabling technology that allows those credits to be backed up, that allows them to exist, allows them to have
Issued
rigor.
in the first place. Yep.
So that's
And
that's
priced highly enough to matter in terms of marginal income to farmers. That's another
mm,
important piece. Because if you issue credits and they're not sufficiently compelling to buyers to pencil
mm,
out
mhm,
for revenue that flows through to land managers, like who cares?
yeah. So it's like credit creation and credit quality, right? There,
Yep.
like the accessibility and enabling of that. There's the land manager, land asset owner piece, which you're really enabling the optionality to participate in those same ecosystem services markets,
Hmm.
and or you are basically helping them prove the delta in the management changes and the appreciation and the value add of how they're managing the asset to the asset itself.
Bingo.
Um, and then on the brand side, on the food brand side, it's really about supply chain resilience and ensuring supply through this increasingly volatile and disrupted, you know, uh, climate that we're in.
Yep.
Yeah,
Bingo. And I mean, in any one of these examples, multiple of these motivations can be varyingly important.
yeah,
Um, Organic Valley, for example, has been, as far as I can tell, of large food brands, the most clear that like we will pay our suppliers for reduced carbon intensity.
hmm
Like to my knowledge, General Mills like hasn't said that, and they're
hmm
not, to my knowledge. But correct. If you could represent, I think, the middle of the adoption curve of each of these segments, what you just described is spot on.
hmm cool. For another maybe dumb or layman question, um, Justin at Clear Frontier, Paul at SLM, sustainability person XYZ at General Mills picks up the phone and says, Chris, we need you to go test XYZ plot of land that's 1,000 acres. Like, can you just describe for the audience, like, what does that actually entail? Like, how many people are showing up with what? How long does it take? Maybe
Yep.
not exactly what it costs, but in general, what does it cost? How many plots of the 1,000 acres are you taking? How far apart are they? Like, just describe the like, we're on the farm doing the sampling. What is happening?
Yep. Okay. So one of the first questions is this a single 1,000 acre farm or is it 10 by 100? If it's the former, it's easy. It's one polygon. At least it's easy to determine this detail. If it's 10 by 100, the next question is, are you trying to quantify stocks across that portfolio of acres, or do you want independent quantification of all 10? Because, for example, if you're General Mills and those 10 farms represent 10 different producers, do you want to be able to report results back to 10 producers independently? That makes a lot of the measurement work harder. So that's question number one, is like, how is this land organized? What are your goals?
Yeah.
Question number two is methodological guidance. Again, are you a VCM project developer? What do you want to say? Right? Start with the end in mind. Is
Mhm.
this an on-pack claim? Is this an ROC? Is this a whatever? But let's
Yeah.
define any external methodological guidance. That will help us determine how accurate we need to be. All measurement has inaccuracy. All measurement has margin of error.
Mhm.
You can imagine putting one sample site in the backyard of my office here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and using that one sample site to represent all of America. You wouldn't be wrong in one way, but your error bars would be infinite.
Yeah.
So you would be correctly describing the mean of American soils with your disclosure n equals 1 sample site, which means your error bounds are too big to be usable. But that said, on that 1,000 acres, you could put 10 sample sites, you could put 100 sample sites, you could put 1,000 sample sites. What that does is reduce the margin of error.
Got it.
Then you would send me field boundaries, and those will be typical GIS file formats. Sometimes our customers don't have those, but usually if you don't have GIS file formats, you're not about to like spend money on soil carbon measurement. You can always create those, you can trace their solutions, but usually you send those over. We put all of those requirements in a blender, and we tell you how many sample sites, where do they go, here's how we're going to do sample plans. You tell us a bit about management, so we can tell, aha, it's a ranch. It'll be hot in July, but we can go there. Or, oh, it's corn. Don't go in late August because you'll be walking, and that increases costs. If it's a ranch, is it a ranch like right next to Denver or like middle of nowhere, right? Like we've had to abandon an ATV on a mountain once because like we got on a weird sketchy slope and like there's like no way down. So,
Yeah.
People think of Yardstick, I think a lot of time as like a fancy tech company, but like a lot of our value creation is because we've been on like all the land use conditions of the world, and we can tell therefore like how is this going to work for your particular situation.
Yeah.
You hand us field boundaries, we do a bunch of math, we design a sample plan, and then I'm making this up, but I mean, let's say there's 100 sample sites on your 1,000 acres of corn in Iowa. That's probably, 3 people for 2 days.
Hmm.
Depends on whether your, 1,000 acres has a river going through the middle of it, if it's a mountain, if it's in
Yeah.
Ghana. But teams of 3 to 5, typically at a given property for, 2 to 4 days. We've done like multiple 100,000 acre ranches in Mexico. So sometimes it is weeks in total.
Yeah.
But most things, a small team of a few people for a week.
So if I then have that first round of data, and let's consider that the baseline or whatever term we want to apply to that, just once again, basics, like for me to measure any rate of change, do I need to wait 6 months, 12 months, 36 months for it to be legit? Do I need to do that 3 times over a 3-year span? Do I just need to do it once, 12 months later?
Yep.
And I'm assuming there's variability to that, just like there was variability to the first answer, but like what's just the general table setting of that?
Yep. So to explain the variability in normal, not scientist, Chris, and it sounds like Anthony terms, a thing that is changing quickly can have a detectable change faster. So my oldest kid is 9. I can measure my 9-year-old every 6 weeks and be like, yup, right? I'm 39, like it's probably not worth measuring my height until I'm 60 or so, right? And then, every few years, probably go in the other direction.
Yeah.
So this comes back to like the expertise that is needed within our customers. The question becomes, great, what is the magnitude of expected stock change? And so the technical term here, another acronym, would be minimum detectable difference, MDD. Basically, if you think like how fast is the kid growing, you can calculate like when should you go back and look again. That said, most methodologies require direct measurement no less frequently than every 5 years. Soil carbon changes slowly. Sometimes even 5 years is too fast. there are companies out there that are saying you sprinkle our fancy carbon dust and a year
Yeah.
later, blah, 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 like kind of like categorically bullshit. Like,
Right.
or if there's evidence to stand up those claims, like they've never shared it with anyone ever. Um, it's not impossible. It's just never anything I've ever seen. And so, 3 to 5 years is a good rule of thumb. Also, there's a sort of like quality cost intersection here.
Mm.
You could imagine a soil carbon project developer in the VCM saying, I think Microsoft will spend more on my tons if I measure them every 3 years instead of every 5 years, right? Because
Hmm.
that's like more rigorous. Okay, great. In a 30-year program, now you have 10 measurement experiences rather than six.
Hmm.
That's more expensive. So there's a juice for the squeeze angle here as well. But 3 to 5 years is what a normal guest would have just answered very briefly for you.
Well, I think that's like super important to double click on and highlight on. And I will illustrate it with like you and I's personal journey in this space, which is like you helped start this company in 2020. It's only been 5 years. I
Yeah.
like committed myself to this work in January of 2021. It hasn't even been, a full 5 years. And so, um, speaking for me personally, I can get very frustrated, I think, with the amount of change and the rate of that change I'm seeing in
Yep.
lots of different areas of life, but especially in this work. Um,
Yep.
and it's just kind of um, the correct word is escaping me, but it like puts it into perspective that like, hey, this like takes time. Like we just can't.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can do to accelerate that timeline. Like the timeline kind of just is what it is. It's these natural biological
Yes.
systems that we're not
Yep.
going to change the rules that they
Yep.
that they abide by.
Exactly. Exactly. My line inside Yardstick is another software developer does not make soil carbon change faster.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
yeah.
And I think this is a very deep and rich and underexplored cultural tension
Hmm.
within my piece of the agricultural scene, which is largely the like tech VC,
Hmm.
like piece of it, which is the whole business model of venture capital and like
Right,
coastal tech brain is predicated
right.
on like ChatGPT 4 came out 6 months ago, and now it's like trees don't care. Like they don't care. So if you want to change the world, make a lot of money fast, bless you. I'm proud that I run this company. I believe in the money we've raised. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you're working on different timelines. So as a person, I grew up in New Jersey, which is like I grew up in the like commute into Manhattan part of New Jersey, not the like, eggplant part of New Jersey. New Jersey is an agricultural economy for the record. But you have a lot of like bros like me that are like, and you hear this literally, like you literally
Hmm.
hear people use these words. "Well, agricultural systems are really just another engineering problem, right?" And you're
Mm.
like, in one way, you're right. There's inputs and outputs, and in the
Yeah.
other way, you are like so stupid ass wrong. Have you
Right.
ever spent any time on this? And I'm looking in the mirror, right? Like that's me. I am that guy more so than the other guy, and that means I think you got to select for a different experience of this tension between the fast, the quick, the science, the feedback, the software. The can't everything just be a piece of SaaS with like again
Hmm.
a tree that is like, who are you? You are irrelevant. I am ancient. You are dust.
Hmm.
And it's the handshake between these systems of like speed and coastal and quote unquote left brain and whiteness and maleness
Hmm.
with all of these other ways that the world behaves. That's simultaneously what I find really, really life giving about this work and really
Hmm.
exciting and like really, really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. In my 32 years of life, I have never either seen or been aware of the level of transparency and tension we are living at in that paradox. And it feels very, very, very fucking hard, but also
Yep.
very, very, very necessary.
Yep.
Um, and you know, to double click on kind of like there will be a great paper written at one point in history about the sassification of the world and how that those business models and that amount of success and that amount of wealth that was created was really great in all the ways that it was great, and it was also horrible in the fact that we tried to basically take that system, those models, those paradigms, and like shove it down the
Yep.
throat of so many other things that just are never
Yep.
going to align with it,
Yep.
which is really sad. and
Yeah,
unfortunate.
totally. And I am grateful because, like,
Yeah.
without that shoving down the throat, you don't have the experimentation.
Mm.
Um, that's, I think, again, truest things in the world about holding paradox. My world class coach Oliver taught me that. I am both like glad for that.
Hmm.
That's why Yardstick exists, because tech is looking at agriculture. And I'm like, oh man, like maybe this playbook
Mm.
isn't gonna work exactly the same way when you're just trying to build yet another CRM or yet another project management tool. It's different. It's
Yeah.
fundamentally different.
Yeah. It is a good segue, I think, into the last thing that we need to cover from like a Yardstick product service perspective, which is you do have a software component too. Is that
Yeah,
software
don't worry. We
component
we got SaaS margins. We're good.
is that component simply just like a modeling and presentation tool for the data that you're capturing for your customers, or is it deeper than that? Like articulate the value of that piece.
Is those things. My tech team would be in arms if I allowed the word simply
Yeah.
to to stand there. But yes, it is those things. I mean, you can really think of our software uh, in three buckets. The first is about probe enablement. So our instrument has a computer on it, right? I've talked about it being trained on data.
Hmm.
I try and unsuccessfully, I try and avoid the word modeling when I talk about probe enablement because it's so confusing with the soil biogeochemical modeling that's happening within perennial regrow, habitaire,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Model just means like some machine learning has happened, right? Relationships, if X, then Y.
Right.
There is a model on the instrument or in the cloud that says, if you see this spectra, deliver this result. So
Hmm.
let's call that probe enablement. That's the first piece of our software. The second is about planning. So sample plan design
Hmm.
is one of the pieces of the puzzle I described. It sounds simple, at least it did to me. It ain't simple. It's
Right.
unbelievably complex,
Right.
incredibly sophisticated data science, spatial statistics, etc. And then the third is the R, reporting. So I do need to make this data visible to you. We do have like a cute little UI. I can put a link in the show notes for what it actually looks like. More sophisticated customers increasingly are going to want that via API.
Hmm.
I'll plug this into, Ops Center. I'll plug this into Climate. But one way or another, someone needs to be handed things after the fact when the work is quote unquote done. So reporting of results is the third bucket of software that's most enabling of our technology.
Yeah. Um, I want to go to the macro, but I have one last micro question, which is at the very basic level, right? It's really clear that hey, this lab process to do this soil sampling, it takes too long and it costs too much, and we're trying to solve that with this hardware software solution that starts with this piece of hardware that we're taking in and actually measuring the soil with on the farm. Like the basic scientific difference between what you're building in the spectrometer in the hardware versus like the
Mhm.
science of what happens at the lab is what,
Yes.
like when you talk about spectroscopy and you talk about taking a movie of the soil, like
Yeah.
what is
What does
that
that
and how
actually
is that
mean?
different than the lab testing?
Yes. So, apologies to the soil scientists on the pod because this will be a simplification, but I think it'd be a decent simplification. So, in the lab,
Hmm.
the shorthand for this is usually called combustion. So, imagine a teeny piece of soil that gets burned up. All the organic stuff gets burned because it burns. Rocks, until at the temperatures that this operate at, don't burn, right?
Hmm.
If you set your oven to 1,000 degrees, like a loaf of bread will be toast. The pan might get warped, but like it's not melting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the basic premise there. Because we're looking for organic carbon,
Hmm.
let's roast it and then measure the difference in mass before and
Mm.
after.
Okay.
We have only burned the loaf of bread.
Right.
The rocks remain, the pan remains.
Yep.
That's called combustion or Dumas dry combustion. That's the best normie explanation of what
Yeah.
happens in the laboratory analysis. And again, soil scientists on the line, there are alternatives. There's loss on ignition, blah blah blah. But like that's the 80/20 of it in the lab. Our approach, spectroscopy, is a movie. So if I went to the zoo and took a movie and texted it to you and said, "Hey, Anthony, let me know when you see the antelope."
Mm.
You'd watch the movie and you'd be like, "Ah, there, there it is." because you know what the shape of an antelope is.
Mm-hmm.
Same premise, it's just not shapes and it's not only the visible spectrum. So,
Mm.
what our instrument does is it shines light out the tip of the probe. There's a sapphire lens. That light bounces off the soil that is pressed very, very closely up against the tip. And that's because it's underground where there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of pressure. It's pushing soil out of the way to get down there, so it's intrinsically very close to the lens. The light bounces off the soil, goes back in that same lens. We collect that light and we compare the amount of light that we shot out, which is known because we control the bulb at the tip of the probe, to the amount of light that came back. So you can
Mm.
imagine as a percentage, 100% of light went out, 66% of light came back. That delta is extremely predictive of different amounts of organic carbon.
Hmm.
So, strictly speaking, what we are measuring is a difference between light out and light back. But because that is such a strong relationship to organic carbon, and we train it on data that has organic carbon, we can see 66% and say, aha, 3.2% organic carbon. We're doing that 0 to 100% analysis across a wide range of wavelengths. So the visible electromagnetic spectrum, famously Roy G. Biv, has different colors, right? So you could think about like, oh, I got a lot of red back and only a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's that same thing, but it also goes into the infrared end of the spectrum, so wider than the spectra that our eyes can see. That means if you imagine that the x-axis is wavelength, in our case it's about 350 to 2250 nanometers, and then the y-axis is 0 to 100, you can imagine a squiggle. And so at a given color, blue, maybe we got 31% of light back. At a different color, brown, we got 61% of light back. That squiggle, which is really just a whole bunch of 0 to 100 stacked side by side,
Mm-hmm.
that squiggle represents an organic carbon value. And then we're doing that continuously along the profile.
Yeah.
So the video that I'll send you is our 45 centimeter probe. So we're doing that in real time along the profile. So you could take that plot, turn it vertical, and imagine the squiggle changing as you go down the soil profile.
Are you able today, and maybe it's just confidential if you're not, to articulate like where are you at in that pursuit of like benchmarking with the regular sampling, right? Like, is it 90% accuracy? Is that even the type of metric that you use to measure that?
Yes.
Like,
Yes. So this is critically important to like the whole way that we're trying to do this,
yeah.
which is yes, I can give you that answer. And you can read it in a peer-reviewed public journal called Geoderma, which is like the best motherfucking soil journal in the world. Like we're trying to do this within the soil science establishment because
Yeah.
that is understandably like the first question the soil scientist asks.
Yeah.
We have that one published paper, which was in Illinois, and then in conversations with customers, of course, we show lots of other data from other locations. Um, percent accuracy is a statistically worthless concept. If you ever see any company, no disrespect, again, art school, I love you, but don't worry. Like you're in good company. There is no such thing as percent accurate. Like that is
Yeah.
not a thing.
Yeah.
If you ever see a company saying percent accurate, you can very confidently assume that either they have no clue what they're doing, full stop, or the marketing department has way too much control,
Yeah.
and the science department should like flex a little bit. There are way more complicated, unfortunately, there are way more complicated ways of quantifying accuracy.
Mhm.
In our paper, we talk about R squared, root mean square error, bias, RMSE. There's all kinds of, RMS, whatever. They're in the paper. You can read the paper if you're a real scientist, which I am not.
Mhm.
But the TLDR, again, for normies is like, it's the same. Like we can do this. Especially because right now, one of our bugaboos that we are working to destroy is the illusion that laboratory analysis does not have error. Many
Mm.
methodologies treat this quote unquote gold standard data
Mhm.
as gold standard. And that is like not an evidence based assumption.
Mm.
And so part of the storytelling challenge of the company has been that if the baseline itself has uncertainty that is
Right.
not quantified, we're being compared against a crummy baseline.
Mm.
But yeah, it's comparable. It's replaceable. It's the same. It's one for one. we have very sophisticated data science to defend that claim,
Hmm.
and the methodologies require it. Like if you read VM42, there's a whole section on like how to defend whether your spectroscopy is an acceptable alternative. It says spectroscopy is acceptable. If you're going to bring spectroscopy data to us, here's what you
Yeah.
need to show us. And like that's exactly what we do.
Yeah. Well, that's really exciting to hear, one. And two, I admire you and the team's ability to just like manage that complexity and like build with it in mind and either for it or against it, depending on how you kind of want to position it. Um, I do want to move into the macro. I think there's a few macro topics that you and I are both aware of, involved in, and the audience is aware of slash involved in, and they will do a good job kind of expanding on what we've talked about to this point.
Mhm.
Um, I first just kind of want to get your take on the voluntary carbon market. Like, where the hell is this thing going? What's it going to be in
Yeah.
10 years? Like, what do you think about just like the state of where that's at and where we're headed?
Yeah. So I kind of, as a rule, don't try and like predict the future 10 years out. I can barely handle like 12 months, right? Um, but what I will say is this, like, I don't know anybody that has a first principles argument that the VCM is not part of our toolkit. So will it be big enough to matter? Here's the thing, I'm really good at arguing either side of that. Like,
Yeah.
this is the nature of hard things. This is why all of this work involves a judgment call. If it were obvious that the VCM is a bazillion dollars 10 years from now, more people would be doing it.
Hmm.
If it were obvious that it's going to zero, no one would be doing it. It's not obvious. It's actually fundamentally unknowable
Hmm.
in many ways. Nonetheless, what's a world that doesn't contain that as a component? Just like doesn't make sense to me.
Hmm.
I am concerned that as the VCM gets big enough to have real climate impact, it's also painful enough to companies, CFOs, to beef with it.
Hmm.
So, one thing that I would love VCM apologists to bring to me is an economic argument for when these are real costs to a public corporation, what makes them keep paying them? That's my most uh, durable, critical perspective on the VCM.
Yeah.
My most promising one is it is born like a whole bunch of great innovation that then gets cycled into other things. So
Right.
the most inspiring vision that I have personally for the VCM is that it will be massively successful in order to inspire other things that are not in fact voluntary. At the
Hmm.
very least, if it only establishes that transitions are possible without cratering yield, holy shit, like that's a gift to all of humanity.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have to do a back of the envelope of the VCM 10 years from now to raise money as a project developer, right?
Hmm.
And so, like, I haven't. And I deeply respect people who both say, like, no, this is going to be the gazillion dollar thing that McKinsey said it was going to be 5 years ago. And I really respect people who are like, it will always be marginal.
Hmm.
That said, our biggest customers are VCM project developers, right? We do more revenue in the VCM than we do in the scope 3 or food or brand or land fund.
Hmm.
Biden didn't like support those efforts all that much. So there's not a lot for Trump to pull back. Republicans love voluntary behaviors, right? Like
Yeah.
it's all stick. So I don't see my VCM customers pulling back, sunsetting. It's
Hmm.
challenging,
Hmm.
but nonetheless, at least looking at the last 18 months, I continue to be confident that that is going to be a growth lever for a yardstick. I'm not sure I can look you in the eye and say we're going to do $500 million in measurement revenue only on the basis of the VCM, but thankfully that's not my revenue goal this year. So we call that a tomorrow problem.
Yeah. And to give people perspective that aren't in it every day, like specifically from a soil carbon perspective, these markets have only been around for what, 5, 10, 15 years? And like they were built by a lot of other things that predate them that have had way more time to kind of like figure it out, so to speak. Correct?
Exactly. For the better or the worse. And the kind of abridged history is that most of the quote unquote nature based
Yeah.
part of the voluntary carbon market was created with forestry,
Hmm.
and
Right.
particularly this premise of avoided conversion. Hey, this forest is going to be cut down unless you pay me to
Yeah.
not cut it down.
Right.
That has had unbelievable rigor quality problems. Unbelievable. And the highest quality soil carbon methodologies today, the ones that I believe can actually move the needle for land managers in richer countries like America, countries like America, are like 3 years old, 4 years old, like
Right.
very, very young,
Right.
which means they are just starting to issue their first credits. And those methodologies have all learned from the problems of this crisis of the avoided conversion forestry market of the past.
Mhm.
So yes, it's small. Yes, it's easy to report large year over year percent growth rates because the baseline is so small. If you are a project developer, you are not going to be looking at 100 million tons of demand each year,
Mhm.
but steadily and slowly, which again, back to like 2 topics ago, is the way agricultural systems work.
Yeah.
It is absolutely headed in the right direction. People love to shit on indigo and they don't update their priors. Indigo is one of the strongest soil carbon programs in America right now.
Mm.
They had to go through a whole bunch of difficulties to get there.
Yeah.
They've issued annual credit. They've done annual credit issuances 4 years in a row now. They've issued nearly a megaton, 1,000, 100,000, a million tons. Like
Mhm.
that's a lot of tons at the prices that they're getting now that again can actually move the needle on rich country American farmer income. So it is both uncertain, challenging, hard, and absolutely headed in the right direction, especially when you start to fold in sister efforts like this program CRCF in Europe. I mentioned CBAM, this cross-border adjustment mechanism, which is like a quasi-compliance, effectively a unilateral global carbon border tax, like is a pretty cool system to have. Those are the promising signals that I see that sort of VCM and VCM adjacent opportunities can really go the distance despite the challenges that we all see.
Yeah. Man, I really appreciate your ability to give concise articulation to things that are very complex and not extremely well understood, at least by me. I want to
Maybe
double click
concise
on,
relative to the complexity. I've not been
yeah.
flattered for being concise in general, but thankfully you let me roll. So you're welcome and thank you.
Well, I think you're doing great and I appreciate it. I just want to double click on the paradox of like, you didn't use this verbiage, but I will, existence versus significance. You talked about that kind of
Mm-mm.
very, very beginning of answering the last question. And I think, you know, it just should be acknowledged and like known. And I will like throw my hand up of like, I feel like one of the few people that leans a little more to the existence side. Like, hey, I know these specialty premium brands that are making these on product regenerative claims can only affect so much acreage, even if they just go totally gangbusters and we grow the hell out of them. Right.
Yep.
But just because that might be insignificant compared to all the acreage of the multinational commodity supply chains, it's not
Yep.
completely insignificant, right?
Hell yeah.
And then I can put the other hat on and say, hey, like we really got to do most of the work on the other side. So
Yep.
I just acknowledge like that shared pursuit of living in that paradox as well. And I think we need to be able to have discussions that um, can acknowledge like the good and the honest truth about each side and stop always trying to
Hell
like
yeah.
maybe compare them or pit them against each other, I guess is my
You bet. Love
yeah.
that. Yeah, I mean, saying it back to you, like, here's another paradox. Small is beautiful and like big is beautiful.
Hmm.
Like, they're both true, right? And my theory, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but my theory is that you are more likely to value the quote unquote small end of that spectrum
Hmm.
because you are actually in relationship with them.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
love them and they love you.
Hmm.
And you see that they're like real people really doing their best. And they're probably even people doing their best with what they literally have. I
Hmm.
run a melon company. I run a premium melon company. What the hell do you want me to do, Anthony? Right? Like quit and go work for some like LCA SaaS startup? Like
Yeah,
fuck that. I know how to grow melons.
yeah,
And that's I think where we get back to this like I haven't found the right metaphor, but like the coastal tech brain versus the other
yeah.
brain. It's not that one is good and one is bad, like all things. Like they each offer something critical
Hmm.
to this whole thing. But if we're not in community with people that are trying to solve problems, we
Yeah.
treat this like a spreadsheet exercise.
Yep.
And when you start treating people like spreadsheet, everything goes poorly.
Hmm. We've talked about, I think, the answer to this question a little bit in various threads throughout the episode, but I just wanted to ask it directly. And it's very simply like, why has nature-based solutions and why have food and ag as a climate solution not attracted the level of capital that we feel like it deserves, or the level of capital that other perceived solutions have? Like, what do you think are the biggest drivers of that?
Yeah. So, as with many complex problems, it's like really hard to tell what's a cause and what's a symptom. So,
Hmm.
there's a bit sort of like, who's the mommy and who's the baby here.
Yeah.
But a few things that are top of mind for me. One is a lot of times when that analysis is done, it's looking at venture capital.
Yep.
The business of venture capital is return the fund.
Yep.
So, like, you're already selecting in a very, very specific way.
Yep.
Combine that with the ostensible track record of things that are ostensibly called ag tech and the reality that, like, most venture capitalists are unbelievably consensus driven, do not have unique perspectives on the world, are telling their LPs that they're going to do outsized returns and then behaving exactly like the rest of their
Yeah.
cohort. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. Um, I should not do ag tech because it doesn't have good returns is like a pretty easy way to guarantee that it's going to continue to have middling returns, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to spend somebody else's money. So, although I literally do. So, like,
Right.
all the mercy in the world for all the venture capitalists who are the exception to the rule and I adore and are on my cap table very specifically. But I think there's a difficult sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of like, what's an acceptable scale of success? Therefore, what fits that pattern?
Hmm.
And we've got some recent data that there might be a sort of like structural barrier
Yeah.
to the home runs. Back to your point about take the playbook and cram it down on their
Right.
throats, right? It might just like not fit. It might fundamentally not fit.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is I think a lot of the same. Where has a lot of venture money come from culturally?
Mm.
It's come from, you don't think of a farmer. You think
Hmm.
of like an iBanker or like a hedge fund manager or a
Right.
pension investment manager. And so people pattern match. They like things that fit.
Yeah.
Farming,
Yeah.
if you do your diligence, you very quickly realize like, oh, farming is not like a piece of software, right?
Yeah.
Like
It's
maybe
literally the most urban white male profile of capital of all time.
Totally. 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 Except for, of course, all the like retiree, like rich white guy cosplay,
Yeah.
gentlemen ranchers. That's always the exception that proves the rule. But exactly, right? Like you know, um, capital accumulates, it reinforces.
Yeah.
And when I look at a credible list of, I don't know, climate solutions in agriculture, to pick one list, a lot of them look a lot harder than a SaaS product. And
Yep.
so I think there's an LP allocation challenge as well. And again, what's the mommy and what's the baby? But then the third is like, there's, of course, infinite entrepreneurial energy within agricultural communities. And like, as far as I can tell, they are at least directionally a little less likely to be Twitter famous,
Mm.
and particularly Twitter famous in like intersecting with funding. There's
Hmm.
always, there's exceptions that prove all of these rules, absolutely. But I think a lot of the times these analyses are choosing a lens that definitionally excludes a whole bunch of things. And so, of course, like when you look only one place, you don't see whatever you would call it, thriving agricultural entrepreneurism that has like a different set of like fit criteria or not.
Hmm. Yeah. Agree on all those points. And like you said, it's really hard to separate cause and symptom, I think, a lot of the time. Um, and you and I could probably spend a long amount of time continuing that conversation, but I think that's a good coverage of it for today. Um, I want to talk. We've alluded to policy a little bit, crop insurance, kind of like motivations, incentives, carrot stick a little bit. Uh, there's a very recent case study that you were like highly involved in as a business that I think we should just
Yes.
talk about and hear you maybe tell the story or share your perspective on it. Um, and it's the Climate Smart Commodities Program that was put in place by the Biden administration and has now since been kind of like redacted almost fully, I believe, by the Trump USDA.
You can call it that. Yep.
Um, and I remember when it was happening, it was this very celebrated thing. It wasn't without its warts, to use your
Yep.
language, right? But personally, it wasn't perfect. But I was very excited about some of the organizations and people that I saw involved in projects and receiving money. But maybe for those that are also even completely unfamiliar, can you just give a little bit of background on what it was, Yardstick's involvement, and like maybe what was the promise and now like maybe potentially the negative fallout of not being able to participate anymore? I don't know exactly where all the projects stand that you guys were involved in.
Yep. So I might get the dates wrong, but I think it was announced spring 22 as $1 billion.
Hmm.
Hey, we're going to call it climate smart commodities. This is USDA. We've already got support of the Farm Bureau. Like they already had a whole bunch of big ag baked in.
Hmm.
Bring us proposals. So there was an unbelievably fast proposal process, significantly to make sure that there was progress ahead of the next election cycle, is the best
Hmm.
analysis that I can do.
Right.
Which means, I think in retrospect, folks could probably argue that some of the selection and evaluation was rushed. Announcements were fall 22. They ended up awarding $3.1 billion. Where did the extra $2.1 billion
Yeah.
come from? I don't know. I don't know how the government works, but like, there they are. 141 different projects, all 50 states, every major commodity, thousands of individual organizations. And what all the projects had in common was a specific scope to establish the potential and value of climate smart commodities.
Yeah.
The process itself highlighted, don't only talk about climate, right? Talk about livelihoods, talk about all this other stuff, but like nonetheless, the branding was there. Took forever to get a lot of these signed and kicked off. USDA was not ready to like administer this program.
Hmm.
High quality criticisms of some of the MRV rigor and MRV coordination.
Hmm.
Uh, Yardstick was on, I think, 6 different awards. I expected someone to say, here is the data dictionary. You must define soil organic carbon this way. No, don't heat your combustion machine to 1200 C. Heat it to 500, whatever.
Yeah.
And very little of that happened. Um, that was trending positively over Q1 after the inauguration. Most of the talk, including from USDA people, USDA staffers, not USDA political appointees, was we're going to change the name, we're going to take out all the black people, but like largely it's going to stay in place.
Hmm.
And like I don't like either of those things, but like I'm definitely not in charge. So between that and the whole thing getting nuked, like that's an enthusiastically positive outcome compared to the alternatives. So we were cautiously very optimistic all through Q1. We were wrong. I
Yeah.
think it was second week of April, something like that. Put out a press release calling the program a Biden era climate slush fund
Yeah.
and canceled the whole thing. Now the asterisk is they said actually there's going to be this other thing called AMP, like Advanced Market Producer, whatever,
Yeah.
and you can reapply to that. Some of the projects were automatically moved into AMP. There
Hmm.
were some criteria that they explained, many criteria that they didn't about like what survived or what different, what didn't. But definitely get rid of all the black people and poor people.
Yeah.
Definitely reduce budgets for MRV. Got to jack up the amount of money that's flowing through to producers, and then we'll evaluate them as they come in. My theory is that they're going to slow walk the reevaluations of all, so to basically like not do any of it,
Yeah.
and also because then therefore some of the programs aren't technically canceled. You don't have a class action basis on which to sue for a cancellation because you haven't experienced one. So long story short, it got nuked. It was brutal. That's a big hole in our revenue pro forma. More importantly, like all the folks that we were supporting were doing great work. It was midstream that like
Yeah.
when you stop science midway, you don't get like 50% of the value. Like you
Hmm.
usually get like rounding to zero of the
Hmm.
value. I don't want to say that categorically, but on balance, we spend an enormous amount of that money and aren't going to get anything for it, for really like crummy but totally unsurprising, exclusively political reasons. It
Hmm.
had challenges, but it was broadly popular. Again, the Farm Bureau supported it. Like
Hmm.
many mega ag corporations were recipients of money, and even in the initial scope there was a clear incentive to maximize the portion of budget that was flowing through to land managers. That's how you get
Yeah.
people to participate and enroll. So it's really just, I think, a sad, perfect microcosm example of like so much of what's really sad about America
Hmm.
right now. Um, and yeah, on balance, you can kind of just call the whole thing canceled and dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it sucks. I know a couple of the projects that are still ongoing, whether they like will remain ongoing forever, I don't know.
Yep.
I know plenty of people like yourself that basically it's all, kind of gone to zero.
especially because, we are a very like climate
Right.
story company. So in some ways we're a liability for these programs, right?
Right.
Some of them have storytelling adjacencies that are feasible.
Uh-huh.
You know, I could find change soil carbon for soil health on my website, and like there would be no confusion about like who we are as a company, especially because one of the clear like carrots that was dangled is jack up the percent of total project budget that's flowing through to producers. That's got to come from somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And so measurement, especially with like the absolutely just horrifyingly unscientific behavior of the administration overall,
Uh-huh.
I have mercy on these people who are like, listen, I can still get money in these farmers' pockets, and yeah, I'm going to measure a fraction of the stuff I wanted to, but like it's that or nothing. To me, I'm like, go with God. You're
Yeah.
doing your best. I understand why we're cut.
Yeah. The are there any existing mechanisms either within the farm bill or in USDA that are like a good fit for y'all to plug into right now, or is there not much that you can build around?
Not really. And to be clear, we don't really have a farm bill right now. It
Right.
expired a long time ago, and it's just fun
Right.
experiencing these like 1 year extensions.
Yeah.
There are programs that we could fit in eventually, but back to like our focus on soil organic carbon. There's a very famous program called EQIP and CRP
Yep.
that has received a lot of high quality criticism from climate people for being decent conservation work and
Uh-huh.
actually very low quality climate work.
Uh-huh.
Those are different things. Conservation and GHG, CO2e are not the same thing.
Yeah.
I would love to have seen in the Biden administration a reevaluation of some of how those programs are run, so that outcomes-based measurement, to go back to one of the very first things you pointed to, is increasingly important. But the short answer is, even though some of those programs require soil sampling for reporting, organic carbon stocks and stock quantification is not really in scope.
Yeah. Well, we'll hope for improvements there. I don't know if there's any real reason to hope in the short term on that specific topic, but
But there
um,
rarely is, and that's the thing about hope is it's not a product of circumstances.
yeah. I would love to get your take on this term regenerative. I've heard you offer a lot of interesting takes on it, and I think they're all super valid, and they've been super, intriguing for me to hear in the various platforms you've offered them. But I'm most specific to hear your take, which I believe is going to kind of be contrarian to mine, of like, where do you see it long term as a consumer claim attached to an actual product?
Yeah. Yep. So thankfully, I don't remember any of my prior characterizations of it. I, as always, like reserve the right to change my mind. Um, so I'll tell you what I think about it generally, and then I'll tell you what I think
Yeah,
about it specifically vis-a-vis consumer products. Generally, I just want it to mean something specific.
right.
It could mean something important specific. It can mean something worthless specific. But like, if words don't have meanings, it's a we're probably wasting our time.
Yeah,
There are many compelling definitions. Considering my company, I want it to be one that is primarily outcomes or impact oriented.
yeah,
The whole reason Yardstick exists, a little bit hyperbolic, but you get my point, is because the relationship between cover cropping and all these other things that we want is tenuous. I personally do not actually want cover cropping for cover cropping's sake.
yeah,
I'm sure there are some people who actually intrinsically love cover cropping.
yeah.
That's like actually that's the thing. That's the goal. Most people want it for something else. And so at the end of the day, what gets measured gets managed.
Mhm.
If you are measuring percent of acres cover cropped, you will optimize percent of acres cover cropped.
Yeah.
Is that the thing you want? Again, I have mercy on the people who have to measure this shit for a living, and they're like, "Sorry, Chris, you haven't handed me an easy alternative," and that's usually a great rebuttal.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, I will continue to posit that we do not actually want cover cropping. We want other things, so let's define those other things and capture data on them. That's why SHI is such an amazing organization because they do the connecting between cover cropping and productivity, cover cropping and arm farm economics. Yes, it is hard. No, it is not impossible. I always want to see things more outcomes based, more specific, because otherwise you start optimizing for the thing that is not actually your goal. And over a long enough period of time, like that gets fucked. Like that just
Mhm.
definitionally like goes south. Rebuttal. Oh, let's not be the good be enemy of the perfect. Hell yeah, great point. I don't know. Everyone's doing their best. Um, particularly vis-a-vis consumer products, I think something that I've said before, which it sounds like you may have heard, is I don't think that like consumer behavior is going to be a significant lever of change.
Mm.
I generally do believe that. I honor the people who believe the opposite. Sounds
Yeah.
like yourself included, almost all of your guests.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of relationships, right? Is like I know people whose whole company is predicated. Actually, another measurement company recently, Eric at Audacious, of
Yeah.
course, I've told him many times, if that
Yeah.
company were run by anybody else, I'd be like, this company is fucked. But I know Eric, and I'm like, golly day, this guy is so amazing. And like,
Yeah.
he's doing it. And I'm
Mhm.
so glad that he's doing it instead of either nobody doing it,
Right.
because I try and have an abundance mindset that, like, no, there is enough money in the world to do Audacious. And yes, someone should figure that out. Do I want my food to be more nutritious? Yes. Therefore, do we need measurement of nutrition? Yes.
Yeah.
End of conversation. Somebody do it. If I weren't in relationship with them, I think I would be like, golly day, that's a tough company to make work.
Yeah.
I am in a relationship with him, to which he replies after a few beers, like, yeah, dude, it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
sorry, like we agree. We agree. It's super important and it's really hard. That's
Yeah.
absolutely what we agree on. I worked at Whole Foods many years ago in cheese and coffee. And classically, I'm a knowledge worker. Like everybody should work a service job
For sure.
one or many times in their life. I had an amazing experience at Whole Foods. This was pre-Amazon. I like was so encouraged to feel like this is the like people really care here. This isn't just talk.
Yeah.
I'm glad Whole Foods exists. I'm glad for all of these experiments. And the thing that gets me most bearish on consumer power is one of the quote unquote most successful programs of the whole thing, which is organics, right? It's still 10% of the whole thing. Decades of work. Best rebuttal. Hey, Chris, what's better than 10%? Like, or what's worse than 10%?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
zero.
Right.
And I think, as we've seen, the outcomes of organic
Mhm.
are less categorically obviously good. Yes, scale it to 1,000,000, as one would hope.
Mhm.
That's, I think, my concern here is there's enough room in the world for everybody. I shop at Whole Foods. I love so many of the brands on your podcast. We've had Maui Nui in our like holiday thank you box. We've
Yeah.
had the like Soul Simple folks
Yeah.
in there. Like
Yeah.
amazing. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And if I wanted to put a dollar on consumer behavior as the lever versus General Mills trying to make sure that oat supply chain doesn't collapse, I put the full dollar on the ladder.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I can't really put together a beautiful counter argument to it outside of like back to kind of the both and, right? Which
Yep.
is,
And that's the
um,
beauty of it. It's not a rebuttal. It's like
yeah,
you're right about the opportunity, and I think I'm right about the challenge.
yep,
We're both right.
exactly.
What a
Exactly.
gift.
Yeah. And it's like, do I think for sure that this term or certifications aligned with this term will ever amount to some meaningful amount of consumer awareness and demand? No, I don't know. But like, do I believe we have to fund the trial and experimentation of it? Yes. Do I believe that
Hell
all
yeah.
those people need to work
Where does
together
that start?
more? Right?
Yep.
Like, yes.
Yep. You bet.
Because like you use organic as an example, it's like, okay, well, that is proof that there is some sort of linkage, whether it's correlation or causation between agricultural practices and some sort of consumer action, right? Okay, but then once again, back to the existence versus significance,
Yeah.
where do you draw the line and what's worth pursuing,
Yep.
funding, et cetera? So
Totally. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, like most of that isn't economics, it's philosophy. Right? Like you just said meaningful, right? Like what's meaningful?
right.
What's meaningful in the world, in my life? Like, right? I'm trying to look my kids in the eye.
Yeah.
Like there is so much work in the world that is so meaningful, that is so invisible.
Hmm.
And I don't want to judge the worth of someone else's best effort
Hmm.
by whether they show up in the top 10 highest growth venture black blah blah fucking bullshit. Like
Hmm.
that's not how I want to define meaningful.
Hmm.
And I want to see every acre of soil in the world
Yeah.
touched in a different way.
Yeah.
That's the paradox to hold right there.
Yeah. I want to ask a follow-up question to the initial part of your response. previously, which was about the definition, right? And it's basically, you're basically highlighting the fact that this thing still doesn't have a universal agreed upon and well defined definition. And I actually believe and could make a pretty compelling case that no matter what happens with the term regenerative, yardstick is pretty insulated from that, like in your work.
Hmm.
And so,
Insulated, do you mean it doesn't affect our likelihood of success or failure?
correct, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I think I agree with that.
I think if the word regenerative goes to zero, like you can still go do everything that
Yep.
you want and need to do, and you would have a lot of like um, reasons to do it and all that.
Yep.
I would like to ask the question, and I'm going to ask the question, then add a little bit of like detail to it. So just bear with me for a second. Of like, how do we get to a definition? And
Hmm.
the detail I want to add to that is like my take in what I observe and see is a very interesting bifurcation of agronomic versus product, right? And so this thing started as kind of an agronomic movement where we were talking about practices and then we were
Hmm.
talking about outcomes. And so you have the infighting on that side that's like it should be about practices, it should be about outcomes, it should be about both. But you ultimately kind of have like the party of defining via agronomics, right?
Mm.
And then on the other side, you have the party of defining via product, which is no,
Yeah.
it has to be a
Claims.
consumer claim, it has to be tied to a
Yeah.
product. And the mechanism is not product or outcomes, it's certification, definition, and whatever the rules are. This percentage of ingredients, this looking, smelling, tasting XYZ way. Um, so I just think that that's super interesting to maybe like just share that observation to tee up the
Mm.
question. But I'm curious, like, can we get to a definition, and like how do we? Is it through the agronomic party, is it through the product party, is it through combination, is it through neither, is it impossible? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really sound way of thinking about the options, especially because my experience is usually, uh, maybe not usually, but often in your language, agronomic people and product people are talking past each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And really what that means is they actually value different things.
Hmm.
And that's what they haven't reconciled.
Hmm.
You're arguing about should it be blue or green, and you haven't actually revealed the underlying thing that you actually want.
Hmm.
In my experience in those conversations, agronomic people, of which I am less likely to be one just because of my knowledge and experience, can handle the complexity of agricultural systems.
Hmm.
um, they often feel that a reduction to outcomes is fundamentally a compromise rather than fundamentally an achievement, which is
Hmm.
largely the way I characterized it, 10 minutes ago or whatever. Um, Product people usually, I think, are rightly pointing towards markets that need numbers and spreadsheets,
Yeah.
and they want to reduce complexity. Um, and both are right, right? Like, here's the thing. So, in terms of my preference,
Hmm.
um, I don't think I'm not sure that those are. I don't think those two categories map to practices versus outcomes exactly. But in general, you've already heard me say, like, my priority is outcomes. I want to define desirable outcomes
Hmm.
very, very carefully, very carefully. SHI, Soil Health Institute, their line to us has always been like, carbon's a co-benefit, man, right? Like there is a way, I think, of defining outcomes holistically. There's a way of
Hmm.
defining outcomes that acknowledge the complexity of these natural systems. But nonetheless, on balance, I think I will largely continue to be team outcomes. But I don't think that maps perfectly, so I don't think I have an intrinsic preference between the
Yeah.
two buckets you've presented. I think what's most likely to actually happen, um, which is maybe a like, I don't know, uninspiring way to think about it, is whoever figures out how to make money,
Hmm.
that's the person that'll define it.
Hmm. Well said. Hmm.
Whoever figures out how to make money. Right now,
Hmm.
ROC can help you make a little more money, maybe.
Hmm.
Probably not good data on that.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, when Mintel is like organic on pack versus blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
then you're like, because somewhere in the world is a financial analyst at a mega hedge fund that owns 7% of a giant carrot company, right? And they're like, hey, should we go organic or not?
Yeah.
And there is a crazy ass spreadsheet
Hmm.
that helps them make that decision. That is not how all decisions in the world get made.
Hmm.
it is how a lot of decisions at the biggest companies in the world get made,
Yeah.
whether the conclusion comes first and then you create the Excel spreadsheet to justify the decision or vice
Right.
versa, who knows? But my theory is whoever shows up with the most compelling economic case of
Hmm.
a definition
Hmm.
is the one that's ultimately going to have the most successful logo and therefore a definition of that logo somewhere on a website.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really strong case and take, and you are probably right. And it was funny as soon as I relayed the question and then unpacked like my observations, I thought of maybe two other variables that I didn't lay out, which is like scientific and political. Which
Mm,
does the thing get kind of defined by science and some sort of scientific standard? And does this thing get taken by policy? Which that's basically what happened with USDA organic, right? Which kind
yep,
of ended up being this merging of science, agronomics, and product. But
yep,
ultimately, I think it's an even further illustration of the point you made, which is like it determined market access and basically a pathway
yes,
to a market premium that then could justify the
yes.
investment of the ROI. So yeah, super
Yep,
interesting.
which itself then defined the outcomes that were likely. So I'm not
Hmm.
a scholar of the organic movement. So if I'm about to describe a piece of the history incorrectly, oh audience, please, send me an angry email. But what I have read is, somewhere I think it was like 88 or 89,
Yeah,
there was a big throwdown in organics. And someone said, worker welfare must be in scope. And a whole bunch of other people were like, sorry, too complicated. And the latter won. And so to this day, again, sorry, I expect the angry emails. Like
yeah,
it is a it is a partial definition of what many people assume it should mean, could mean,
yeah,
etc. That's how standards work. They include and they exclude, which means, oh, standard setter, define with fear and trembling,
yeah.
because what we define as regenerative or this claim or that claim is going to influence behavior that will have the benefit of influencing behavior towards the thing that are in scope, and it will
Mhm.
have the cost of not influencing behavior vis-a-vis the thing that's out of scope. When people talk about carbon tunnel vision, I'm like, hell yeah,
Right.
I am worried about that. And actually, there's a really interesting divide within the VCM part of my community, which is basically one group of people is worried that we will minimize the centrality of the carbon question,
Hmm.
and therefore the whole thing will be too bloated and complex, and we
Mhm.
will not accomplish anything. And the other camp is worried that carbon actually is an unacceptably narrow definition, and we will be successful and we will over optimize only
Mhm.
for carbon. And like organic, there will be things left out that bug us. And I'm like, yeah, that's the challenge. I think woe to the person that thinks there's a simple answer to that.
Mhm. How do we expand the ability to greet the complexity needed here in the macro? Is it like
Yeah,
AI is
man.
going to take away all the simple stuff, so it just gives us more time to like live in these complexities and paradoxes? Is
Oh
it,
no. I think AI is a simplifier in an unhealthy way
yeah,
rather than a healthy
yeah,
way. I don't know, man. I love your neighbor.
mm,
I wish I had a better answer than that.
yeah,
I don't I don't know. I literally believe that that is the best answer I've got for that.
yeah.
Love your neighbor.
Brother, this has been a super fun conversation. Anything else you'd like to add? You'd like to put people on the lookout for? Is there a specific place we should direct them beyond the website to get in touch with you or your team? What should we wrap with here?
I am Chris at useyardstick.com. If you would like to be my customer, I would welcome the opportunity. You can hit me up. We focus most of our communications on LinkedIn, so you can check us out there as well. We're
Yep.
often hosting webinars, happy hours at conferences and whatnot. And if you're coming through Cambridge, Massachusetts, hit me up. We're remote first, so I'm the only one here. If there's someone else at the company you want to meet, don't hit me up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But always happy to get a beer or a coffee with somebody who's vibing on what we are.
Yeah, love it. The Yardstick team, I think, will be out in full force at Climate Week. So also, if people
Yes,
are going to be on the ground there and interested in stuff, hit up the team, hit up
please.
Chris.
Yep. We're running
Um,
a soil and ag people run on Wednesday morning. So particularly I'll make sure you get a link for that.
nice. The web address is useyardstick.com. We'll put that in the show notes along with a lot of other fun stuff that I have written down in chicken scratch to my right. Super fun. Really appreciate the work you're doing, man. Thank you for joining us. And super, super great, fascinating conversation. So thank you.
You bet. It's an honor to be included, not a brand. And here I am.
Thanks, brother.
See ya.
For transcripts, show notes, and more information on this episode, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, the Regen Brands Weekly, and follow our Regen Brands LinkedIn page to stay in the know on all the latest news, insights, and perspectives from the world of regenerative CPG. Thanks so much for tuning into the Regen Brands podcast. We hope you learned something new in this episode and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, your talent, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.